Okay guys, so today we are ranking the Tales series, and by that I mean the games in the Tales series. Now, I want you to all bear in mind that I haven't played all of these games, and some of these games I haven't even finished. And I want to talk about why I haven't played the games if I haven't played the game, but also why I didn't finish the game if I didn't finish it. But either way, it's going to end up somewhere on this tier list. So, let's get started with the very first Tales game, which is Tales of Phantasia. This is the first game in the series, sure, but it's also a very important game. And the reason for this is because this game spawned a development team known as Tri-Ace. Without this game, Tri-Ace would never have existed. And with that in mind, this game is very important because it pretty much gave birth to a lot of my favourite games. And if it wasn't for this game, a lot of my favourite games would never exist. So it's very important to me, but as a game itself, it's very antiquated. There's no two ways about it. This game is dated. I mean, for the time, it was pretty good. I will definitely say that. It's a really good take on what would later become like the action RPG formula that you see in Tales and Star Ocean, but it wasn't the only action RPG out there at the time. I mean, you had East, for example, so it's not the only thing. And you also had the Seiken Densetsu series as well, and they kind of had like this whole like everything is seamless and you just fight with everybody around, like just the field areas, just fighting. In this you have battle transitions, but it's in real time, and that's the thing that stood out for Tales of Phantasia. But the thing about it is that compared to a lot of the games nowadays, it's definitely antiquated. Like, it's not like one of those games where like you can do the crazy combos that you can do in the later games, but it's still a fun game if you're willing to put up with its antiquated stuff. I think this is one of those games that you experience mainly for what it is. You kind of gotta like it for what it is. It's an old Super Nintendo or Super Famicom JRPG that's real-time action. What do you expect, people? Real-time action RPGs back then were not really as complex as they are now, and they're not really as deep as they are now. They were experimenting with combining RPG elements with action at the time, and yeah, because of that, it's definitely not aged the best because of that. And I feel like a lot of games that pretty much existed prior to 2000s, like in the 5th generation, a lot of beat 'em ups around that time were struggling. And the thing about it is, with this era, it was a lot of games like Golden Axe, Street of Rage, Final Fight, and all that lot. They were the beat 'em ups at the time, and that's what people knew. And there were other games like that. Whereas nowadays, obviously, you have your 3D beat 'em ups, and there's a lot more to them. This game came out at a time where really the beat 'em up franchise was very different to what it is today. So you've really got to bear that in mind when going to play this game, and the same goes for some of the later games as well. But I do think that this game has a lot to offer still. It's still a really fun adventure. It's a little generic, but it is kind of interesting at the same time. I like how they kind of like put everything together. I like how they go about doing what the story is. I'm trying not to explain too much because I don't want to spoil the plot, but the plot is very generic, but the way they actually present it I think is really good for the time, because usually when you play an RPG that has this sort of plot, they present it in a really generic way which isn't really interesting. This game actually tries to present it in a more interesting way, and I'll definitely give it credit for that. The thing is, where am I going to put this on the tier list? Because with it being antiquated, it's definitely a hard sell for a lot of people, but at the same time, if we're looking at it for its time, it's definitely going on good tier. But like, it really should be here based on today's standards, because that's kind of how it feels to play. It feels mediocre to play, but as a complete package, I'm going to put it at good tier because I actually really do think that this game still has a lot of things to love about it despite it being antiquated, because it still has a really great world. Like, I liked how they fleshed out the story, and even the characters are charming for the time. There's a lot to like about this game, but you really have to go into it with expectations. It can't reach the tier of great for that reason, but it is one of my favourite soundtracks of the 90s. It's brilliant, and it's probably the most important soundtrack Motoi Sakuraba has ever composed because of what it represents. Because this guy went on to make music for Star Ocean and then Tales, which is a huge deal. So definitely putting this in good tier for sure. Right, so next we have Tales of Destiny. I didn't play this game because this game never came out in the UK. It's that simple, and I don't think it ever got ported in any shape or form whatsoever. So yeah, this is an enigma to me. I never played Destiny, and I find it kind of weird how the Tales series kind of has like two PS1 era, like 5th gen JRPG entries, as we're going to get to the other one next, but I do find it weird how they managed to get two of them out, but Tri-Ace only managed to get one out, and that was Star Ocean 2. This had two of them, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Namco are a big company and Tri-Ace not so much, but at the same time it's crazy how they managed to create two games in 5th gen. Like, you'd think that there'd only be one, but no, there's two. That's insane. Here's the thing about Tales of Eternia. This is a game that I am violently, and I mean violently, mixed on. And when I say violently mixed on, I mean there's a lot of things I really adore about this game, but there's a lot of things that I really don't like about this game. This game has a lot of really good stuff, but it has a lot of really annoying stuff. It feels like a really weird game for the Tales series as Eternia. Even compared to that of Phantasia, like, Eternia feels so weird. It feels like it doesn't belong in the series. It really does. Like, when you play it, it just gives you that very different feeling. Like, if you went from Tales of Phantasia to Eternia, it would feel just odd. It's one of those games that just... I feel that it's forgotten, or it feels like something that would be forgotten, because you have 4 characters in this game that have any dialogue whatsoever. There are other characters, but they never talk, or barely talk, and they're barely even in the game. And the main 4 characters, while they do try to have some compelling aspects to them and some compelling moments, I ultimately feel that they fall flat just simply because it just felt like it was very last minute when they really started to put a lot of attention to detail in the characters and actually focus more on the characters themselves. It felt like too little too late. I feel that the character that got the most attention in this game ultimately was Melody. She felt like the central character for most of the game, but eventually you reach a certain point where the other characters start to get fleshed out, but you would think that they would get fleshed out much earlier, and it happens right at the last minute, and there's like this huge section of the game which really goes deep into these characters. But the problem is that it wasn't a thing that was progressive. It wasn't something that was constant throughout the game. It all happened at once. When it happened, it really was impactful. But the thing about it is that most of the game, yeah, you do have character dynamics, but I don't really think that the character dynamics alone were enough to truly make the characters work for me. And that was the problem. I mean, As a cast of characters, I can't say that it's a terrible cast. I absolutely can't. I think there's a lot to like about the cast, but I do think that in terms of how they were handled, it is a little flawed. And I think the biggest sin that this game makes is the fact that these 4 characters are the only characters that get any attention, because they aren't the only characters in this game. There are 2 more characters in this game. There's this chick who has a pirate hat. I've forgotten her name. I didn't even know that she was in the party. Like, I played the whole game thinking that this chick was just an NPC, because she never talked in any of the events in the game, and she never really says anything of value. She's just kind of there when you go on the ship, and I never really checked to see if I could swap her in until the last minute. I'm like, hang on a minute, she's in the party. When did she join the party? I didn't know I could put her in the party. But she's not the only character, because there's another character as well that you can put in the party. I'm not going to spoil who he is, but he's the same. He never talks in important events. Like, there's no real character development for him. There's not really much characterization for him either. He's just kind of there, and once again, he feels like an NPC that you only see in certain areas, and then when he's in the party, he's just kind of there, and the game forgets he's there. It's almost as if, the characters were added at the last minute just so that you had other characters to swap to. It kind of felt weird to me, and that was the main thing about Eternia that really bothered me. But not only that, this game has a lot of vague bullshit. I feel that in the later sections of this game especially, there are a lot of parts of the game which are super vague and require you to just hunt for stuff. Like the part where you get the submarine, you have these coordinates, and you have to basically travel the world where these coordinates are, and you have to enter a cave underwater in the game. And that was a pain in the ass. Oh god, I hate doing stuff like that. I really do. That part of the game was just absolutely aggravating. It really was. And there's quite a few annoying puzzles in this game as well, particularly in the final dungeon. My god. The part I hated the most of this game was the final dungeon. The final dungeon and the final boss, I hated. I despised the final dungeon, and I despised the final boss with a passion. Just horrible. Just absolutely horrible. But what I liked about the game was the world. The world was really nice, particularly the second world. I really liked the tone of the second world and how they really fleshed it out. It's kind of tragic, but at the same time you have that warm, homely feel. It's a really odd combination, but it's kind of heartwarming and tragic at the same time, if that makes sense. And it's definitely the most impactful part of the game, and I really like the second world a lot. The first world, though, I wasn't as keen on. I just felt the first world was very generic. And yeah, but when you get to that second world, oh my god, that's the thing about this game. I really like how they managed to do that. But ultimately, where do I rank it? I mean, I think despite all of my grievances with this game, I think I should still put it on good tier, because I really like what they were going with this game, and I can clearly tell that they put a lot of effort into trying to make this game what it was, and it's something that I definitely respect. It's not a game that I'm going to go out of my way to say that it's fantastic and amazing and perfect in every single way, because it's not. But at the same time, it's definitely a game that I do think deserves more appreciation for what it at least tries to do and what it actually manages to do, because I feel that it is an ambitious game for the time, and it definitely did a fantastic job at making me care in certain moments. And I think that's important for a JRPG, regardless of how flawed it is, because if it's impactful, then it's succeeded. So yeah, I put it good tier. Didn't play it, didn't get released in the UK. Tales of Symphonia. This was an interesting one, because you would expect me to have played this game back in the day on the GameCube. I regret to inform you that I did not. I saw the game in stores many times and I always passed up on it. Big mistake. Because this game is fucking amazing. It really is amazing. Like, usually when you play a game that is like considered to be like an overrated game and all that lot, which a lot of people say that this game is really overrated and like overhyped and stuff, like usually you end up being disappointed. But while this game does have its problems, and I will say that it does have its problems, there's no two ways about it, I definitely think that this is the best Tales game, without a doubt. And there's a reason why. This is where the series peaked, as far as I'm concerned. And the reason being is because Tales of Symphonia is the real Star Ocean 3. It's the game Star Ocean 3 should have been right from the get-go. It has an affection system for all the characters, so it's kind of like got its own private action system, which, yes, it's skits, but it kind of looks more like a private action in this game because the choices you make actually affect like an affinity system, which ends up giving you a certain scene later on in the game. And that means that every playthrough is different somewhat. Whereas in other Tales games, you can't say the same thing. This is one thing that Symphonia did that was unique to Symphonia, and that's one of the reasons why it's the best Tales game in the series. Another reason why it's the best Tales game in the series is because it has the EX skills. And the EX skills, while nowadays pretty much every Tales game lets you learn them, and you can just have like all of them like at once in some of them and all of that. In this you really had to customize your setup, and I liked that aspect. I liked how you couldn't have everything and your moveset was going to be different. Like every player would have their own choice of moveset. Like your moveset would be different from another person playing the game. So you could have like a strike or a technical moveset and it was personalized. And I really liked that fact. I like how you could personalize your moveset and you could like decide instead of using Sovereign Alpha, you could do, I think, Twin Tiger Blade or whatever, or Supersonic Thrust. I forget which one it was. Like there's loads of different moves. Like as I say, like Strike has Twin Tiger Blade, I think, but I forget. They have different moves for each one, but yeah, like you could choose which one you want, and it'd give your character a slightly different playstyle and focus on different things depending on what you wanted to do in the game. And that also gave the game replay value as well, as you could decide on the next playthrough to go the opposite route and try out the different moves. Like this game, it really feels compelling to go back to for that reason alone. But on top of that, when you do replay the game, you can use the grade that you carried over from your previous playthrough to purchase the combos from the shop. Like it's called combos, but it's kind of like the thing that you carry over. And what this does is that when you increase your hit count, it actually affects the experience points that you gain after every fight. And you can abuse this to get super over leveled early by playing good and getting all these high combos, and it feels so satisfying and rewarding when you actually do that. And that's one of the things I loved about this game as well. And while the game's story starts off quite slow, admittedly the game in general starts off quite slow, when it picks up, I feel that the game really is a fantastic story by the end. Like this is a very slow game to start out with, and I can totally understand why people would not be willing to continue on with the story. I mean, for someone like me, you wouldn't expect Tales of Symphonia to be my favourite, given the fact that it's fucking full of annoying puzzles throughout the game. It's literally a nightmare for someone like me, and you wouldn't expect me, of all people, to like this game the most, but I do. And it's crazy that I do, but it's because I was so compelled by the narrative and the gameplay and the personalization of it that I was willing to put myself through all that bullshit. Because that's the thing, the puzzles in this game can be absolutely obnoxious and a nightmare to get through. That's its biggest flaw. But I will tell you right now, as someone who demonizes puzzles with a passion, I will tell you that no matter how bad the puzzles are, this game is still worth it. Even if you suck at puzzles and hate puzzles like I do, this game is still worth your time in my opinion, because you're still going to have a great experience with this game, one way or another, if you're willing to stick with it, and if you enjoy that sort of game, because obviously not everyone is going to enjoy playing action RPGs where you have lots of personalization and stuff. I get that, but if you like this sort of game, it's one of those games that you really need to stick with. If you don't want to stick with it, I get it. You don't have to stick with it if you don't want to, just don't play it. But if you're going to play this game, you've got to have patience, but if you do, it will pay off. It will pay off, and I do think that this game has a very satisfying conclusion. It has a lot of really interesting themes in it. I do think that people do underappreciate those themes in the game, and like, I feel that other games kind of overshadow it, despite the fact that people call it overrated. I actually feel that it is kind of overshadowed by some of the later entries in the series, despite all of that, which is kind of ironic, because there's a lot of things this game does really well, and it definitely deserves more attention from people who haven't given it a try. But for those of you who have given it a try and you think that it's overrated, you know, I understand as well, because it does have its flaws. It is dated in certain ways compared to later entries, and at the same time those puzzles are a pain in the ass. But at the end of the day, it is a 6th gen game, so it's going to have that sort of thing. I mean, people complain that games don't have puzzles anymore. People complain that games are just corridors now. People actually complain about that stuff. And this is a game I actually like, despite having all the puzzles and stuff that everyone's crying out for. So why is it that people are saying this is overrated when it's exactly what they want? That's what I don't understand. But either way, we're moving on to the next game, which, well, Tales of Symphonia, Dawn of the New World. Oh boy. I think we all know where this is going, boys. Yep. This is one of the worst games I have ever played in my life. This game is a disaster. I don't even know where they even... I don't even know why they even came up with the idea to make this game, but it was such a stupid move, like, especially after a game as amazing as this, to go to this. Why? Now, I'm gonna say one thing. There is one good thing about this game. One thing that I actually do like about this game, and that one thing is the fact that you can actually catch monsters and train them. I thought that was a cool idea, I did. Unfortunately you can't control them though, but it was a cool concept, and I will say that I did kind of like that, and it was the one good thing this game had. Everything else about this game sucked. It's kind of got like that sequel, it's got that problem that it's a sequel, so obviously you're retreading the same ground, although they do try to remake the areas to make them look nicer than in Symphonia to like enhance the graphics. But the biggest problem with this game ultimately is the protagonist, Emil. Like, he is such a fucking pansy ass bitch. Like, my god, like, this guy is just so obnoxiously fucking, he's just so obnoxious in how much of a bitch he is. He is the character that nobody wants to play as. And yeah, I get that, you know, you need to have that relatable character one every now and again. That, I mean, well, is he even relatable? I don't know, like, I mean, if you're traumatized, I kind of get it to a degree, but I think this guy takes things a little bit too far, let's be honest, people. Like, my god, like, all the conversations in this game are just straight up meme-worthy, because of just how overly apologetic this guy is. And it's just like, this guy is just such a fucking wet sponge, and he's just so likable to play as in the game. I mean, when you play as him in combat, he has good air combos, but that's about it really. Other than that, he's just another guy in the game that you play as, and that's it. I don't feel that the combat feels good. One thing I feel about the combat is it feels weird. One thing that I do have a huge criticism about, which might seem petty on the surface, but it is actually kind of important is when you hit enemies that are guarding, it makes this really weird sound effect, like you're just punching, like if you have one of those like inflatable balls, or like it's like you're punching one of those, and it's just like, or just tapping one of those inflatable balls. It's this really weird sound, and it's just like, this is horrible. Like, when I hit an enemy, I want my hits to have an impact. I want the attacks to feel like they're being guarded, so like having a metal clang sound would be nice or something, which I think in Tales of Symphonia they use, but not in this game. It feels like you're just literally touching or tapping a beach ball every time you do it, and it feels so horrible. I hate it, people. I fucking hate that. But yeah, like, as I say, he has good air combos, but there's really not much to it because you're mainly playing as Emil or Marta the whole game. You'll probably not use Marta because she has to heal all the time because Emil can't heal, and unless you want to manually heal the whole game, then you have to use Emil. And you can't use any of the other monsters, unfortunately. You're just stuck with him or Marta the whole game. There are some other characters that join you, but they don't level up, so you can't use them. You're just stuck with the same characters, and it just gets old, you know? And if you do use the other characters, well, they're just pointless anyways, and they'll probably leave the party, disappear, or whatever, and then you're stuck with Emil and Marta again. So you're better off just using the monsters that you trained up to fight for you, because you can level them up. And yeah, they swapped the world map, overworld, with like a menu where you just go from place to place and stuff, and you go through all the dungeons again, and just like in Tales of Symphonia, the puzzles are just as annoying as ever. Oh yeah. It's basically retreading through the same old bullshit all over again, and yes, it's still annoying as hell every single time. And yeah, it's taken all of the bad parts of Tales of Symphonia and not really focused on the good. I mean, there's no EX skills anymore. It plays more like the newer Tales games, so it's just like very bland, very boring. Like, most of the time I was playing the game, it made me want to fall asleep. Like, it really did. And like, the fucking character dynamic between Emil and Marta is just fucking cringeworthy. Like, fucking Marta, like, my god, she's like that obsessed, like, you know, that obsessed girl meme? That's what she is. She's fucking stalker material. Like, she is fucking obnoxiously fucking leading on this fucking bell end fucking Emil, and it's just like, she's just as obnoxious as he is in a different way, and I just can't stand either of them. I'm just gonna be honest. But you know, I just think, and at the same time, it's just so surreal, and just like, there's no way a woman would do that to a guy like that unless the guy just happened to have a lot of money. Which I guess all the money that he earns from monsters, she just wants that money from him, and that's what I'm assuming that's all about. She's a gold digger. I prefer to believe that she's a gold digger because at least that's believable. Because if there's clearly no real romantic interest in Emil at all, because he's such a fucking weak ass bitch, and because of that, it's just like, yeah, it's pretty obvious anyways that she's actually really like romantically interested in Asta and not him, which you can tell, but she's confused and she doesn't know what's going on, and it's just such a stupid plot. It's such a stupid fucking romance. I just don't like. I hate romance in general in video games, but when you have a romance like this, it's just horrendous. I mean, you can do romance right, you can do romance well. I might not be a fan, but I can at least tolerate some, and I can at least appreciate some for trying to actually do it well. This does it absolutely horribly, and it is just so fucking... It feels like a fucking bad fanfic. It really does. It's just horrible. It's just fucking horrible. I hate this game, people. I fucking do, and I know all you guys will agree with me. There's a few of you that won't agree. That's fine, I understand. But yeah, Tales of Symphonia 2, if you play Tales of Symphonia, don't play this game. Don't play this game. It will ruin Tales of Symphonia for you. It will ruin it. Like, just play Tales of Symphonia and be done with it. Don't play the sequel. Just play Tales of Phantasia afterwards, and that's the continuation. Like, Symphonia 2 never happened. Right. Okay, Tales of Legendia, here we go. Another game that never came out. Oops. Never came out. It's not shipped here, guys. Sorry. I didn't mean to do that, guys. That was an accident. I know a lot of you are very passionate about Tales of Legendia. I know a lot of you are very passionate about this game. I know a lot of you don't like this game as well. I know people hate it, and there's some people that love it. You gotta bear that in mind. I do apologise. That was a pure accident by me. I did not mean to put it into shit tier. I've never played this game, so I don't have an opinion on it. But I will say this. For the love of Jesus, Namco Europe, fuck you. Fuck you for not giving us this game. Why is it always you that has to ruin everything for us? Like, why does the UK get shafted by Namco Europe all the time? Why do we miss out on games like this? Whereas America gets it, Japan gets it, but we don't? Why? Why are you clearly against letting us play all the cool games, Namco? Seriously, I mean, Namco Europe are my sworn enemy. And it's not just Tales, this is just one of the Tales games that never got localized over here whatsoever. And it infuriates me how it never got localized. I just don't understand, like, why? Why Namco Europe? What have we done to deserve this? Why do we get treated like second-class citizens by Namco Europe? I just don't understand it. It's ridiculous. But yeah, from what I've heard, this apparently is a very meh game. It's not a great game, but it has an amazing soundtrack by Go Shina, and people really appreciate it. And some people like the game as a whole. It's definitely a game that I'd be interested in trying one of these days. So, you know, I'm not against trying it. It's just that because it never released over here, I just never really got around to playing it. So, yeah. Right, so next up, I know it says that, but we're talking about Tales of the Abyss. This is another game that never came out over here until we got the 3DS version, and that's the version I played. So once again, Namco Europe. Why? Why did we miss out on this incredible game? Why? Because this game is incredible. As you can tell, it's going on the great tier because it is incredible. I love this game. Now, do I love this game as much as Tales of Symphonia? Personally, I like this one a little better, but I absolutely love this game nonetheless. I really like what they did with the story. The villain is the best villain in the entire series by far. I love the villain of this game. He is definitely the best villain in the series, without a doubt. It also has some pretty cool characters. I like Jade. Jade's a pretty cool character. Guy's alright, you know. The characters are fine as well. Like, I think the characters are good overall, and it's got a great story. I really feel that the combat, though, it was a step down from Symphonia in my opinion, because you didn't have altered arts. Instead you had these Field of Phonon areas that you had to use, and I just didn't really get into that personally. Like, I'd rather just have like a third art in the chain than have like Field of Phonons personally. But you could utilize them in combos, but it's very situational because you need to be in that area, and yeah, I just wasn't really a big fan of that mechanic. And the EX skills thing changed so that you could just have everything, and yeah, it just kind of got rid of that personalization aspect of Tales of Symphonia. And you didn't have the replay value of Symphonia either, and yeah, it felt less like a Star Ocean game, which to me is a big deal because I'm a huge Star Ocean fan, and more like a straight up Tales game. Like that, and to me that's a downgrade, personally speaking. But I will say this, for a Tales game, it is probably the best representation of a Tales game. This is more the Star Ocean 3 we should have had. This is more the quintessential Tales game experience. That's the best way to describe them. So if you are a Tales fan, you're probably going to like this more. But if you're a Star Ocean fan, you would probably like this more. It depends on what series you have more affinity with, I would say. Because this is more Tales, this is more Star Ocean. I know it sounds weird because they're both Tales games, but this game feels like it has a lot of aspects that Star Ocean has that I like, so I have more affinity for it. But this definitely deserves praise. There's a lot to like about Tales of the Abyss. You know, it's got a cool world, it's got some really cool lore and cool aspects in the story, and I definitely think it deserves more attention and definitely belongs in the great tier because it is a great game. I really do like it. It's definitely one of the great, amazing PS2 JRPGs out there that I think that is worth experiencing for sure. Now, what I don't think is so great is the next game. Oh boy, people are going to be pissed at me for this. Tales of Vesperia. Well, this game, man, I think the best way I can describe this game, like, I wasn't mad about this game, I wasn't mad at this game, I was just disappointed. Like, everybody hyped this game up. Like, people say this game's overrated. Hell no, this is the most overrated Tales game. This is the one, not this. This is just the game that everybody played back in the day and knew, and it's just kind of like fallen off in later years because people don't really talk about it as much anymore. Now it's all about this. This is the most overrated Tales game by a mile. Because one thing I will definitely say, as someone who didn't play this game back in its day, I played this back when it released on the PS3 in the Symphonia Chronicles, so I didn't play this on the GameCube, I played this later. So I would definitely say this game stands the test of time and deserves the credit that it gets. This game, on the other hand, in my opinion, does not. This game is ridiculously overrated. Now, do I think this game is the worst game ever, like the Dawn of a New World? No. Do I think that it's even good? Well, let's put it this way. I'm putting it here. And the reason why I'm putting it there is because I think that Tales of Vesperia is a playable game. I think the combat system is still a solid combat system, but the story of this game is just a mess. And I feel that this game, even though it has arguably a really good combat system, it just feels like such a hollow game as a whole. It feels like I just didn't feel the same feeling I felt for this game as I felt for these two games. Like, these two games felt like they had a lot of soul, and like I just really love what they did with the story. They were really well done. This game is just all over the place. Like, the story is just so disjointed. Like, you do one thing in the story and then just suddenly it just comes to a standstill, and it's literally where it's almost as if the writers are like, okay, so what do we do now? We've done this plot, so how are we going to move on to the next plot? And yeah, it just, like, the way that the plot kind of flows just doesn't really work. The plot doesn't flow at all. It just goes from one plot thing to another. It's like three completely different stories. That's what it's like. It's like three completely different stories that don't really connect. Yes, there's certain nuances that do, but the story, like, in terms of plot, it just doesn't. It just doesn't connect at all. And that wouldn't have been so bad if it wasn't for the cast of characters in this game. And while I will say that not all of them are annoying, unfortunately it has enough annoying characters to ruin the whole thing. I mean, Yuri, he's alright, but, like, I guess he's cool, but he's not really that cool. You know, he's what I would describe as being one of the boys, you know? He's on that tier. Like, there's the cool tier and then there's the one of the boys tier. He's on that tier. He's just a dude. That's it. He's just a dude. He's the dudiest dude that ever dude. You know, he's a man's man. Like, then you get Carol, and Carol is just a fucking whiny bitch the whole game. Like, Carol is I wouldn't say he's as bad as Emil, but he's almost on that level. The difference between him and Emil, though, is that Carol, like, he talks a lot of smack, whereas Emil is just completely like he's just got no self-confidence whatsoever. Like Carol just talks a lot of smack, but he runs away like a pussy the first chance he gets. Now, you could argue, yes, he gets character development, but he's just so annoying for most of the game. Like, he just is, and it just bothers me. It really does. But he's not even the worst character in this game. The worst character in this game is fucking Rita. Rita is one of the most insufferable female characters I have ever seen in my life. She is the definition of an absolute bitch. And I mean that. Like, oh my god, she's not only obnoxious, she's just a shitty human being. Like, she abuses Carol the whole game. I mean, yeah, Carol might be unlikable, but the way she treats the rest of the party, she treats them like dirt. She treats them like shit. And it just makes her look like a fucking asshole. Like, it just makes her look like just an unlikable person. And that's really all she is. Like, people love Rita for some reason, but I just think that she's just a toxic human being. I just think that she's a toxic person, and I just can't stand her. I just can't stand this character, and she's just so obnoxious. Every time she talks, all she does is bitch and moan, bitch and moan, bitch and moan the whole game. She just does that non-stop, and I mean non-stop, just constantly bitching and moaning at everyone or at everything. She's like your average Twitter user. That is what Rita is. She is your typical Twitter user. Does nothing but bitch and moan about everything and everything online. That's what she is, but she does it to all the party members. And she just acts like a complete obnoxious bitch the whole game. There's not a single moment in the game where she isn't moaning about something. Like, seriously. Then you've got the other characters, okay, but I didn't really get into them much. And Patty is in the PS3 version, I didn't play the PS3 version, I played the Xbox version, so, you know. But yeah, that's all I really have to say on it. I mean, I should probably talk about music, because one thing I forgot to mention about Tales of the Abyss is it's got a pretty banging soundtrack. Symphonia's got a decent soundtrack as well. Phantasia has too, but Vesperia, I love the first battle theme in this game. I do, but it's so tragic that they changed the first battle theme to the second battle theme, which is probably what I would consider to be the most generic Motoi Sakuraba song of all time. It really is that second chapter battle theme. It's so generically Sakuraba. I suppose if you haven't heard as much Sakuraba as me, then you might like it, but personally, it's the most generic thing he's ever done. And the third one, you know, it's alright, but I still like the first. The first is always going to be the best of this game, but it's nowhere near as good as Edge of the Decision on Tales of the Abyss. That's my favourite battle theme in the series. I fucking adore that theme so fucking much. But yeah, like, other than that, I really don't have too much to talk about with Vesperia. It's just kind of there. It's playable, but it's like, you know, you just want it to be over by the end because you're just fed up with it, and that's kind of how I felt. It was just like, it's one of those games that I just couldn't wait to be over. Even though it was playable, even though it was alright to play, it just didn't really feel like I was fully, like, engaged with this game. It was just kind of like, you know, trying to keep myself awake while playing a video game so I don't put myself to sleep. That's what Vesperia was, and it was just like, I managed to get through it. I'm like, we did it, guys. We got through Vesperia. We've done it. We've survived the monotony. That's kind of how it felt. So yeah, that's Tales of Vesperia. Right. So, the next game is... I'm actually going to put these here right now. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tales of Hearts Art. That is released over here. Why is it here? Well, I don't own a Vita. It's that simple, and I just never played it because I never played the Vita, and yeah, that's why. Would I play it if I could play it? Maybe. But I just didn't play it because I didn't own the Vita, and these are just Japan exclusives, so yeah, I didn't play them. So what's the next game that we did get? Well, that is the first Tales game I ever played. Tales of Graces F. As I say, I didn't play Tales of Symphonia back when it released. I wish I did, because it's a great game. But my first game was actually this, Tales of Graces F. I wanted to try the Tales series back when Vesperia was a thing, but I didn't want to jump in on Vesperia. When this game came out, I thought this was the best time to jump in and give this series an opportunity. Tales of Graces F is an interesting one because it kind of pioneered a new type of combat system which revolves around having like attack strings, which is kind of where the series went later on. And yeah, you have these attack strings which you can turn into different attack strings, but there's also another sort of attack, which is the B-Arts, which kind of functions the same way as the arts in the previous game's work. It's a unique combat system for the time, for sure, and it's definitely a fun combat system. But there's one thing that I do think kind of lets this system down a little bit, and that's the fact that the game seems to want to discourage you from connecting these two arts, because you have enemies that are weak to A arts and enemies that are weak to B arts. So the game's just like, instead of actually combining them together and making things more interesting, it's just like, well, just stick to using one because it's just more effective and more efficient. And I'm like, why? Why do we have to play that way? Why? And whenever I use Asbel, for example, if I use A arts and switch to B arts, I have to, like, he has an animation, or these animation frames, which kind of like delay the combo a bit, which that kind of bothered me. It's just like, why can I not transition into a B art combo from an A art chain? I don't understand that. Why that's not a thing is beyond me, because they missed an opportunity. It really should have worked that way as far as I'm concerned. But I do appreciate the fact that this game really did try something different, and I will say that the combat overall is very good despite all of that, and I did have some fun with the combat system for sure. I arguably would say that I had more fun with this combat than Vesperia's combat. Even though Vesperia's combat does have quite a lot going on with it, I think this game, it doesn't feel like it's as complicated as Vesperia's combat. And I think for what it is, like when you play these games on the surface level and you don't go into like the deep complexities of the systems, this game is definitely the more fun to play when you consider that. But it's very different. The whole way that damage is calculated is interesting, because it's like your damage does, like when you see a damage number show up on screen, you're not actually, that damage isn't exactly what you've just done, it's actually accumulating as you create a combo, and the last time you see that number after an accumulation is the amount of damage that you deal. Which, that was kind of weird at first, but it's actually kind of interesting how they did that, because it meant that you don't have stupidly high HP enemies all of a sudden. Like, yeah, it kind of encourages you to maintain a combo to see numbers go up, which I do think is a cool thing. Now, here's the thing about this game. The story of this game, on the other hand, is kind of mediocre. I didn't find the characters to be obnoxious. I mean, you could argue Pascal was a little bit obnoxious, but she wasn't too obnoxious. She wasn't unlikable like Ria. I suppose she was alright. She wasn't that annoying. She was just kind of, yeah, she's that type of character, isn't she? Like, she's going to be a little annoying, but just not my type of character, let's put it that way. But I don't think the characters were annoying. I just felt that the characters just were kind of bland overall, personally. I just wasn't really into the characters as much as I was, like, Abyss and Symphonia. But they weren't terrible. The story itself wasn't bad, it's just nothing special. Like, it's definitely not the most memorable Tales game for me, even though it was the first. But it definitely wasn't a terrible one. I had some fun with Tales of Grace's F for sure. I don't really know where I would put this game with all that considered, because, I mean, mediocre, I feel would be a bit cruel to this game. But I would probably, given the fact I put Eternia on good, I'm probably going to put this on good as well, because just for the combat, I think the combat in this game, it definitely sells it for me. It's definitely the one thing this game did right, and given the fact that this was my first game in the series, it's definitely one reason to put it in good tier, because it got me into the series. So it definitely did something right with the combat system. So that's one thing for certain. I just don't really think that it's the best Tales game out there. I think if you're playing this game, don't expect too much. Don't go in with high expectations and you'll probably have some fun, but if you go into this game expecting it to be an amazing game, you're going to be disappointed. I think that's the best way to describe Grace's F, ultimately. It's just one of those games, isn't it? Right, so next we have Tales of Xillia. Well, I have an interesting story about this game. Tales of Xillia is tragedy for me. It really is. Because for the first 3 chapters of this game was amazing. I fucking adored this game. For those first 3 chapters, it would have been the best Tales game in the series, had it not been for chapter 4. Because chapter 1, 2 and 3 were awesome. I loved everything about it, where the story was going, the characters were really endearing, you know, like the combat is just amazing. I love the combat system in this game. This is the best combat system in the entire series, without a doubt. I know people will swear by graces, but this one to me is the best. I adore this combat system. It's just so fucking awesome. I love using Jude and his snap pivot skill. It feels good, you know. It feels very snappy, and just everything about it. I just love it. This game rightfully should be the quintessential Tales game, but the one thing that holds this game back is the final chapter, the main antagonist of the game. And I'm just going to come out and say it. They dropped the ball in that final chapter, big time. What they were working towards with the first 3 chapters was really interesting, but like, it's like once you got to the end of chapter 3, like, it's almost like they just, like, it's almost like they threw everything out. The game just deflated. Like, it's just like, oh yeah, the big bad that we're building up to, oh yeah, we're just gonna like cut this story arc short, you know, we're just gonna cut this section of the story short and just like make it anticlimactic. And then suddenly you move on to the next part of the story and it's terrible. It's fucking terrible. Oh my god, I fucking cannot stand where they went with this story. So much promise. This game had so much going for it in its narrative. It was so exciting. Like, I legit felt, when I played this game, I legit felt the same way that people felt when they saw the plot twist of Star Rush Until the End of Time when I reached chapter 4. So I can relate to you guys who hated the plot twist in Star Ocean 3. Even though I like that plot twist personally, I can relate to you because I went through the same experience playing this game. That fucking chapter was a disgrace. An absolute disgrace. And the story was just so infantile at that point. It's just like, why? The story's got so much going for it, and the writers decided to do this? Why? It's such a tragedy that it ended that way. I really wanted to absolutely consider this to be my favourite, but I can't because of that. That ruined the whole game. Chapter 4 ruined this game from being the best Tales game and one of the best action RPGs of all time. And that's tragic. I was absolutely gutted. It's such a shame. Such a fucking shame that they went that route with the story, because had they gone another route, like hypothetical, that's what this game's story needs. It needs a hypothetical alternate route after chapter 3. It needs that, because that would be amazing. Because the way they went with this story is just the most generic, most stupid, most annoying way they could have done it. And for that reason, it's not going in great tier. It's going at the top of good tier. Because while I do like this game a lot, and it says a lot that it would have been the best, chapter 4 ruined it. This is why, people, this is why I always try to finish a game before I review it. Because sometimes with games, you'll get a game like this, where it starts off amazing, it starts off so promising, and then by the end it just completely deflates and becomes shit. And then you feel depressed because you're like, what could be? What this game could have been didn't happen. And I think it goes without saying that I didn't play this game. Oh boy! It goes without saying, after that fucking chapter, after what they did with the ending of fucking Tales of Xillia, there was no way in hell I was playing this. The fact that they had the gall to make a sequel to that ending infuriates me. It's insulting. I know BioPhoenix doesn't like this game anyways because of how bullshit its fucking like death system is or whatever the fuck and all that, but honestly I refuse to play this game out of principle just simply because of how bad this game ended. As much as I loved this game, it's almost like chapter 3, it's like the end of Warcraft 3. Chapter 3 is like Warcraft 3 the Frozen Throne ending. Chapter 4, World of Warcraft. That's what it's like. It's like going from Warcraft 3 to World of Warcraft, but it's going from chapter 3 to chapter 4. So this is like World of Warcraft the Burning Crusade. Am I going to play it? No! No, I'm not! I refuse to play this game. Absolutely. I don't care how good the combat is, I just refuse to play it on principle just because of that. Especially since, like, I don't want to go into spoilers, but I suppose I should put a spoiler warning at the beginning of this fucking video. The fucking main villain is a fucking playable character in this game and is on the good guy's side. They let him fucking live. They let that fucking asshole live, motherfuckers. They fucking let him live. If I was there, I would have had him line drawn and quartered and paraded down his entire city and made an example out of that motherfucker for being an absolute piece of shit human being. But because this is Tales and we have to be goody two-shoes, of course we have to make friends with the antagonist, don't we? Fuck that bullshit. Fuck that bullshit. I refuse to do that. I'm not, like, if a guy's gonna go as far as to be fucking genocidal, they deserve the death sentence. I don't care. If you're willing to take the lives of another person, you're willing to lose yours, so you know what it's like. And that's why, yeah, I refuse to play that game. Okay, so next we have... Oh, we don't really have much to talk about here, do we? Yeah, this is pretty grim right here, folks. Tales of Zesteria, well, I'm going to be honest, folks. At this point, you've got to bear in mind, you know, the whole thing with this game, Chapter 3. I legit think, after Chapter 3 of Tales of Xillia, my interest in the Tales series just completely fell off a cliff. You know, it was a landslide decline of interest. That's the best way to describe it. I think the Tales series was basically over for me after that. Like, I just couldn't bear to see what they did with it, and I just don't think that my interest had recovered after that, because it just, like, I didn't play Xillia 2, so I just kind of like, the series just faded away from my radar, and I didn't play it for a while until, you know, Zesteria. And I didn't even play Zesteria at launch because I just wasn't into it, the series anymore. Like, when I played Xillia, I was so hyped for this game. Oh god, like when this game came out, I was hyped, and I played the beginning part. I loved this game, and I was so hyped for it. You know, and it would have lived up to the hype if it wasn't for that final chapter. I know it sounds like I'm making a big deal out of it, but I really am. It was that disappointing, and I think it ultimately ruined the series for me. I think it did, because I just completely lost interest. And when I played Tales of Zesteria, I'm going to be honest with you guys. And this is the silly thing, I finished this game. I haven't finished any of these games. I haven't finished any of these games, and I want to talk about it right now. Okay, so Tales of Zesteria, I think I put about 6 hours into this game. Already the main character is just so bland and generic and just boring. I don't care for any of the characters at all. The combat system takes all the worst aspects of Tales of Grace's F and just makes it worse in every aspect. Like, the camera is right behind you, so you can't tell the distance between you and the enemy, because it's very hard, because you have to move forward and back. So knowing when to guard attacks and where the enemy's like hitbox is very difficult, because the camera's right behind you. It's stupid. Like, at least with Grace's, the camera was kind of like top down, so you could easily gauge the distance. Not in this game. Like, they really fucked it up, like, with the combat in this game. I think it goes without saying when I'm playing this game, people. I did not like this game one bit, and apparently, like, I didn't even reach, like, the Water Temple, but apparently I heard the Water Temple was horrible, and I saw clips of the Water Temple, and I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't fucking keep playing this game, man. So fucking glad, because it gets worse. Like, man. What a disaster, man. What a disaster. And this is the thing, like, people say that Star Ocean 5 was a disaster. Like, Star Ocean 5 was just so much better than this, because at least it had the stuff that I love about Star Ocean, and at the end of the day, while it might have been like low budget and all of that, it didn't have all the annoying bullshit this game has. And like, the dungeons weren't, like, the dungeons might not have been brilliant in the game, but they're better than this. This game's dungeons, my god, they're just fucking mazes. Like, and, like, I remember, like, like, they were making a big deal about this game at launch, but man, when I played this game, I just felt like it was over when I played this game. I just felt like it was all over. And I just completely lost interest in it. And yeah, like, I just feel that they really dropped the ball at this point with Tales combat. Like, after Tales of Xillia, this is where you go. I mean, don't forget Xillia 2 was a thing, and now with this, now we're just downgraded from Grace's F, and this is the future of the series, really. It's just like, what the fuck, Tales? What is going on with this series? I just don't know. And this leads me to the next game. Tales of Berseria. Where am I putting this? Well, I'm just going to be honest. I'll put it here. I don't really think that this game is as insufferable as this. I actually got much further into this game than I did in this game. This game I dropped way too early. I dropped this game extremely early because I just didn't give a shit. I just had enough of what I was playing. I just like, this isn't fun, I'm done. I just wasn't compelled enough. This game, at the very least, was a little bit more interesting. You had an edgy protagonist, Velvet, who is basically like Wilfred from Wolf Covenant of the Plume if he had a sex change and dyed his hair black and tore all his clothes off. You know, that's basically what she is. And yeah, like, as I say, like, I like the concept this game was going for. From what I played of the narrative, you know, I thought it was interesting to a degree, but it wasn't compelling enough to get me to slog through the actual game itself, because this is basically, I just realised where the Tales series was heading, and it was just heading into mediocrity, and it was just becoming more and more downgraded. Like, it was like, ever since Xillia 2, like, the series has just been, like, on a downward spiral, and it shows with this game. It just feel like playing this game just really made me feel like this series has just completely lost its way, and I just felt like this game just wasn't really enough anymore. Like, all these other games that are above here, like, they have something that they either they just barely make it to be like something I had some enjoyment in. Like, they had enough to make me feel that I just was willing to keep going. This game just didn't have enough. Like, it just didn't have enough for me personally. I mean, yes, they tried a little harder with the narrative and the characters, but I still wasn't, like, compelled enough by it. It was a good idea, but I just wasn't able to just finish the game. I just wasn't. Because I just had enough of the gameplay. I just wasn't having fun anymore. I just felt like the gameplay is just getting worse and worse and worse and just losing its way. And I just think that's the problem with Berseria for me. Like, I just think, and this is the thing, you know, Tales of Arise, I didn't play this game. And the reason why I didn't play Tales of Arise is simply because after this game I was done with the Tales series. I just had enough. This game made me quit. And it's partially not just this game's fault. I'm not going to entirely blame this game for making me quit. I'm going to blame Chapter 4 of this, the existence of this, and this was just like the final nail in the coffin. So this was like, it wasn't just one game that made me quit, it was a lot of things that made me quit this series. This series was declining, and it's been declining for a while. Now, I've heard mixed things about Tales of Arise. Some people say that it's the best in the series, some people will say that it's disappointing. I've seen the combat, it seems very similar to Berseria, but I don't really know enough. But even then, like, looking at Arise, like, I just don't really want to invest in another Tales game personally. I mean, maybe it's a good game, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe it is the best Tales game. Maybe it is, but I just had enough of the series at this point. I mean, you know, we got Star Ocean 6. Like, after that game, I don't need to play this game. I just feel that way. I just, like, I've been well fed, like, in this generation with JRPGs, with that game alone. Do I need a Tales game after that? No. I'm just not interested anymore. Like, the one thing that Tales was doing and doing well was its combat. If anything else, if nothing else, the combat was the main thing that this series was consistent with, and it was constantly evolving and constantly making it better. It just felt that ever since this game, it just completely fell off, and it just hasn't recovered. So yeah, that is my ranking of the Tales series. I know it might sound a little depressing by the end, I get that, but at the end of the day, I've had some fun with this series. Like, if I was to talk about the series overall, I would say, with the exception of these games, they're all junk food to me. They're those types of games that you play when there's no Star Ocean games that are out, which is usually the case, but this is the next best thing, so you go to it. That's kind of what Tales has always been to me. Although these two games are the exception of that rule, I really do like these games a lot, and I think these games hold up on their own as like standalone games. I did enjoy these games up here well enough to say that there is something to like about this series. Anyways, that's my tier list done. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.